Aether, the fundamental building block of all creation. Or so we thought until Endwalker introduced Akasha, the energy of emotion, granting us the ability to transcend mortal limits and push others away. Why focus on a power whose ultimate effect is to push things away? Why do I keep mentioning the power to push others away? We'll get to that and more on this episode of Between the Lines. Also, if you like our content, please like, subscribe, and comment, and be sure to catch our weekly live stream on Twitch. Since ARR, which I reference because that's when I started playing, and where much of 1.0 was retconned, we've been told that Aether is the fundamental building block of all creation, comprising the known universe. Everything in the world of Final Fantasy XIV is comprised of Aether and can be considered the equivalent of matter. In Endwalker, we learned that Aether is a bit like water, and can exist in three distinct states: corporeal, memory, and soul. I can only presume that corporeal aether melts into memory aether, which then evaporates into soul aether and hangs around the inside of Aetheris like a bunch of hot air. I say this because there's been a bit of crossover between the fundamental physical properties of aether and the energy which is wielded to affect aether. Take food for instance. Food is imbued with energy, which is aether. However, the food is also made of aether, so everything is just aether. We learned that the Dancer quest line in Shadowbringers, which seemed totally random and off the wall at the time, was actually our very first introduction to the dread force known as Dynamis. The word Dynamis is derived from the ancient Greek Dynamis, meaning potentiality. It's notable that the Greek word for actuality, which is the realization of potential, is enteleki. It is also used in Final Fantasy XI, starting in the Rise of the Zillard expansion as an alternate universe to Vana'diel, formed by nightmares and drowned in perpetual darkness, created by Diablos. I like to refer to it as a power de-leveling zone where you can go from 76 to 65 in an hour. Very efficient. In Final Fantasy XIV, Dynamis is a bit more of a fundamental concept than a place. Before Endwalker, we had several instances of Dynamis in the game. While not mentioned directly, we did see its effects.
Oh no! Anyway.
So I say everything is made of ether, but then we learn about Dynamis and how 68.3% of the universe is made up of this stuff. If we think about it, that makes a whole lot of sense. 68.3% is the estimated makeup of what is known as dark energy in our universe. Whoa! Now we've opened up a whole other bag of cats. Now we have to feed them. So what is dark energy? Well, in real life, it's definitely not a reality warping power of emotion, but there are many similarities between Dynamis and dark energy. But what is it? The short answer is, we don't know. But we do know the effect it has. Coined by cosmologist Michael Turner in 1998, dark energy still mostly remains in the realm of hypothesis and theory. It is thought to be relatively homogeneous, meaning that it's evenly spread out across the universe. Astronomers also credit this hypothetical energy with accelerating the expansion of the universe. In 1912, Vesto Slipher discovered that light from distant galaxies was redshifted, meaning that it was increasing in wavelength. If one were to imagine a string made into a waveform and pulled the ends away from each other, that would be a redshift. This was the first evidence that the universe was not only expanding, but that the expansion was accelerating. This matches what the Aya of Deneb 3 discovered would eventually lead to the heat death of the universe, and what Medion was hastening through her manipulation of Dynamis, which fits with being a dark energy parallel. What we do know of dark energy is that it interacts with gravity, the same as baryonic matter, which is the matter that we interact with every day, but not with light. Dark matter comprises around 27% of the universe, but has the opposite effect. When studying the mass of galaxies, it was observed that there wasn't enough mass to generate a gravitational pull that was needed to hold them together. Galaxies are unaware of this, however, and maintain their gravitational hold on the stars in their sphere of influence, rather than flying apart and condemning said stars to the void. So, something must be holding them together. Enter dark matter, the glue of the universe. Also interacting only with gravity, dark matter pulls things towards it, the opposite of dark energy. But since there is less of it, and much of it is contained in galaxies, the galaxies are all flying away from each other. It can be easy to forget just how mind-bogglingly vast space is, and that while baryonic matter, or the matter that we can see, interacts with both light and gravity, dark energy and dark matter only interact with gravity, passing through matter without having much of an effect. The space between matter is filled with dark energy. Simply look up at the night sky and see how much matter you see compared to empty space. This is very similar to how aether is contained to plants and stars in the game, and the space between stars filled with Dynamis. But how did Dynamis and dark energy come to comprise so much of the universe? The short answer, again, is we don't know. But we do know that Dynamis is powered by emotions for which there must first be a source. If there is nothing alive, there is nothing to manipulate Dynamis, and it is simply allowed to exist. But why is there so much dark energy compared to dark matter and baryonic matter? Or rather, why is there so much Dynamis compared to aether? Well, let's go back a bit, but first, a message from our sponsor.
This episode of Between the Lines is sponsored by Dynamis. Amaze your friends with the power of your traumatic emotional scars as you warp them into hideous aberrations of reality. Never before has there been such a family-friendly product that's both fun and safe for the environment. Want to resurrect a long-lost love from the dead? Dynamis. Can't rule the world, so you want the ability to make your own? Dynamis. Want the ability to destroy ethereal creation incarnate and use it to expand your ever-growing anxiety-fueled empire? Dynamis. Smite your foes and make them lose 30 levels in a single hour, all with the power of Dynamis. Call now and you can get your Dynamis starter kit for the low price of 14 easy payments of 12,999 gil. Operators are standing by.
Dynamis, powered by Twitter. Twitter is in no way affiliated, associated, or related to Dynamis. Any similarities to people, real or fictional, are purely coincidental. Twitter wishes to know your thoughts, feelings, and words to erase them all from existence, and trademark them under her Dynamis brand. She has in no way sponsored, paid, or endorsed Lorelines, and erased the entire team from reality upon watching this video 3 hours ago. In the beginning!
Well, not quite. We know that the universe of Final Fantasy XIV started with the Big Bang, much as is theorized to have happened in reality. One theory about why there is so little matter is actually a dark matter theory, called the freeze-in theory. This theory posits that when the universe was new, matter, and dark energy existed, but as matter and dark matter interacted with each other, a curious thing happened. Every particle of matter that encountered one of dark matter was destroyed, but instead of being annihilated, the particle of matter generated another particle of dark matter, resulting in a process that actively converted matter to dark matter. That sounds a bit familiar too. At the end of Vanaspati, after defeating the blasphemy, Ishtola comments that it's as if the ether rotted and crumbled away, leaving absolutely nothing behind that she could see. We know from thermodynamics that energy cannot be created nor destroyed, so the freeze-in theory could be a plausible explanation for this. Dynamis interacts with ether under a specific set of conditions. The ether is thin enough to be overwhelmed. The emotional state of the target matches that of the Dynamis trying to influence it, and that there is a specific intent driving it not to destroy, but to convert ether to more Dynamis. In this way, energy is preserved by converting it to Dynamis, leaving the shell of the ether that remains, the body, soul, and memories, to crumble. Given these conditions, the Dynamis transforms the ether and creates more Dynamis. Or, perhaps, whatever the in-game equivalent of dark matter is. There's still 27% of the in-game universe we know nothing about. Perhaps the souls of those who were transformed changed to that, whatever that is, leaving only an emotion-fueled Dynamis husk behind, an echo of a snapshot of a single moment in a person's life. But this of course begs the question, if 68.3% of the universe is Dynamis, and 5% of the universe is matter, then what, pray tell, is the in-game equivalent of dark matter that comprises the other 27%? That's another question we don't have an answer to. But we have a lot of things that we do have answers to. Since ARR, we've been told that we are special because we have the ability to transcend mortal limits. We see this when we hit things for long enough, and our Dynamis attack bar goes ding. Then, we hit the orange Dynamis Go button, and we are treated to a limit break that usually does something we want it to. In most cases, murder. But in some cases, it's to protect those who are with us so they can continue murdering. Or healing and bringing back our friends who had fallen, so they can rise to murder again. Maybe they should call it a murder button instead of a limit break. Anyway, when we learn about Dynamis, everything is laid out to tell us that limit breaks are mortals wielding Dynamis. But we are outright told this in the Endsinger battle, when we use the tank LB3 to survive the phase transition and proceed to murder all of Twitter and all of its tweets. Dynamis. She proclaims, in shock, that her foe is able to wield it as well. We also see that willpower can have an effect on Dynamis. An emotion backed by strong enough will can have a significant impact on ambient Dynamis. When we arrive at Ultima Thule, Thancred's will that his friends survive turn what would have otherwise been a void of nothing into a solid piece of the Dragon Star, complete with the echoes of the dragons that remained long after their race had perished. Each sacrifice, in turn, opened the way forward, as well as making the next area habitable and able to be interacted with by the Warrior of Light and the Scions. While the ad before this was satire, it's not entirely incorrect. At this point, Dynamis can do everything from destroy worlds to create them, create life, end the universe, and change the color setting on LED flowers in the wilderness. Quite literally, plot device energy. It actually goes fairly well with what we know of dark energy, which, aside from pushing the universe apart to its inevitable frozen end, we know little about. We also see that ambient emotions have an effect on Dynamis, but that effect can be mostly suppressed in ether-rich environments. It makes me wonder if the Ragnarok had just stopped in space somewhere and everyone started to panic, if there would have been some kind of Dynamis reaction in the absence of any ether. But say that Dynamis were to react to something generated within Zodiark's ethereal shroud. How would that look? Actually, we've already seen it. The Totentanz, which translates from German into the Dance of Death, forced people who were overcome by negative emotions to dance until eventually perishing. These unfortunate individuals were accompanied by a cloud of dark ether, which could possibly have been Zodiark's protection of darkness being disrupted by the churning of Dynamis due to negative emotions. Nashmera introduces us to the dance after encountering it in both Ul'dah and Gridania, and refers to it as the Dance of the Damned. When fear and anger manifest in the hearts of people, these emotions fester, which cause the Dynamis around people to affect the ether. It formed what she considered an etheric manifestation of those emotions, which spreads like a dark cloud across the land. Often manifesting first in the weak and downtrodden, the shadow eventually completely consumes the individual, taking from them their hearts, minds, and eventually control of their very bodies. As they lose their sanity, they flail about without any regard for themselves or others, going as far as to kill their own children or dismember themselves from the violent movements of the dance. The Totentanz is a phenomenon driven entirely by emotion, which manifests over a long period of time after experiencing something traumatic. People dwell on undressed emotional wounds, which causes them to fester and grow, eventually resulting in the manifestation of the Totentanz physically. The dancers of Troupe Falsiam have dedicated their lives to extracting those negative manifestations through the Kriegsdance, or war dance. However, this only allows people to recover from the physical effects. Once created, the physical manifestations of Dynamis are given a life of their own. Simply driving them out from one host would allow it to take up residence in another, and so they must be dispelled completely before that could be allowed to happen. We can now make the conjecture that they were dancing to the Song of Oblivion, which I hear has some sick beats, and that even through the shroud of ether maintained by Zodiark, the Mateus song had an impact on the world. During the Dark Knight questline, we again see a manifestation of Dynamis in Mist. While Frey is a manifestation of the Warrior of Light's desire to be free and say and do things they otherwise couldn't, Mist is something else entirely. A physical manifestation of the Warrior of Light's guilt and desire to be punished for those they killed and hurt in the course of their journey. Mist's existence and his ability to seemingly summon the dead to punish the Warrior of Light, summons that are fully capable of killing, are a physical manifestation of Dynamis. While Elidibus did something that appeared similar in summoning the hope of souls of Warriors of Light from other shards, he used the Crystal Tower and Grahatia's spell to do so. Additionally, his summons were rooted in aether, while Mist's were rooted in Dynamis. Here, we have no such tools, and are not even consciously aware of our part in summoning Mist, or the shades of the dead they summon. Only the self-inflicted emotional wounds and emotional trauma we bear, given life. We also know that Dynamis can be used to communicate, as Medion displays when speaking to us for the first time, and when she first receives the report from the Matea. But what's most interesting is that Dynamis seems to be a critical component of the Rejoinings. While we don't have much information on what happened on the first 7 shards to be rejoined, we do know what happened on what was supposed to have been the 8th, the first. In fact, M itself drops a hint when he first introduces himself.
Had mankind continued to live in idleness under Vorthry's rule, all the conditions would have been met.
While this particular quote could be attributed to mankind reflecting the stagnancy of aether, he expands on this after Vorthry's defeat.
Ah, the irony. What Vorthry achieved through bliss,
You achieved through despair.
In both cases, it seems critical that humanity be resigned to the end of their world. This means that in addition to twin ethereal calamities on the source and shard, hopelessness is also a critical catalyst for a rejoining to occur. A catalyst the unsundered Ascians were well aware of, which is why they needed sundered humanity to instigate rejoinings, and were unable to initiate them themselves. I should mention that when using trusts in Katisa's Hyperborea, it's notable that the ancient trio is capable of using limit breaks, which are rooted in Dynamis. So while it's accurate that the ancients had a far more difficult time interacting with Dynamis, it's reasonable to assume that it wasn't impossible. But as stated earlier, there's one thing we know for a fact about Dynamis. There's a lot we don't know about it. Much like dark energy, it exists in the realm of theory and speculation at this point. But unlike other real-life tie-ins, this one can pretty much do whatever the devs want it to.